throughout India as well as abroad also. Sir, we have made you the presenter. You can see the sharing rights.
Sure, I'll just share my screen and we can test it out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Your screen is shared and we can see your slides.
Excellent. So, do you want me to unshare or should we remain
Yes, sir.
in
At
this
the
mode?
moment, you can stop sharing because first
Okay.
I will be starting with the webinar
Sure.
at 6 and then you can start sharing.
Sure, absolutely.
Because the introduction will take 5-10 minutes. I will be introducing all, etc. So
I
that will
understand.
take almost 5-10 minutes. So, dear participants, very warm welcome to today's webinar. I once again welcome you all to today's webinar on cyber forensics, investigation techniques and tools for contemporary cyber crimes. As per schedule, within 10 minutes from now, we shall be starting with the webinar sharp at 6. Our expert for today's webinar, Mr. Nishit Narang, Associate Professor, BITS Pilani, has already joined us for this session. The topic for today's session is of much current importance because cyber digital life and cyber world has become all the more important for us in the present times. So I request all the participants kindly ensure that you make maximum use, gain maximum knowledge out of today's webinar. Whatever questions you have regarding today's webinar, you can keep posting in the chat window. I shall facilitate all those questions by noting them down. And at the end of the session, in the question answer session, we can discuss all these questions with our expert at the end of the session. So, dear participants, I hope things are clear to everybody. After this webinar, the feedback form link for certificate of participation generation shall be shared with all our participants. So, all participants are requested that kindly do not leave the WebEx room till the time you get your certificates. We shall be there. This room, WebEx room, meeting room will change into a call center at the end of the webinar so that we can assist you all with your certificate of participation. But please remember, dear participants, you have to fill the feedback form to generate your certificate of participation. Until and unless you will fill your feedback form at the end of the session, we shall be unable to help you with your certificate of participation generation. So that is an important requirement, an important help, assistance that we require from your side. And for rest of things, we are there to assist all of you. So a very warm welcome to all dear participants, all distinguished panelists. I welcome you all to today's webinar on cyber forensic, investigation techniques and tools for contemporary cyber crimes. Within a few minutes from now, we shall be starting with today's webinar. I can see a number of participants in today's webinar. We have a number of students who have just passed out from school, students who have just passed out from college. So all your questions, all your queries would be answered in the course of the webinar. So kindly stay with us and enjoy the webinar. Within a few minutes from now, we shall be starting with the webinar. Participants are still joining in. For the information of all the participants, today's webinar is also being live streamed on our official YouTube channel, BVI CAM New Delhi. But the certificate of feedback form for the certificate of participation shall only be shared on the WebEx room. It shall not be shared on our YouTube link. So any participant, any of your known, any of your friends, any of your colleagues who plan to join the webinar from the YouTube channel of ours, kindly request them to quickly join the WebEx room. The room is still open, so you can join the WebEx room. Whichever device you have joined in for today's webinar, kindly ensure that you can access the chat window. If you are unable to access the chat window, in that case, I request your participants kindly change your device. The room is still open. You can easily change because your chat window is going to be an important mechanism through which we will be communicating through the webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we shall be sharing the feedback form link in this particular chat window itself. Yes, dear Ravi, you can access the chat window. So that is one request to all the participants who are just joining. You can post your affiliation and details in the chat window so that we know who all are there with us, and you can confirm that you can access the chat window. Five minutes from now, we shall be starting with today's webinar. So dear participants, the queries that you're posting in the window, that is your chat window. There is no other different chat window. It is the same window in which you're posting your queries. Yes, dear participants, you're absolutely right. The window in which you're posting your queries, that is the chat window. A very warm welcome to all dear participants and all distinguished panelists. I welcome you all to today's webinar on cyber forensic investigation techniques and tools for contemporary cyber crimes. Very good evening and a warm welcome to this webinar, Professor Subramaniam Krishnamurthy. I can see participants are still joining us. So very warm welcome to all the participants who have joined us for today's webinar. Today's webinar on cyber forensics, investigation techniques and tools for contemporary cyber crimes. Our expert for today's webinar is Professor Nishit Narang, Associate Professor, BITS Pilani. Sir is already there with us, and in few minutes from now, we shall be starting with today's webinar as per schedule. Professor Subrata Mukhopadhyay from IEEE has also joined us. Good evening, Subrata sir. I hope I am audible. Subrata, good evening, Subrata sir. Welcome to the webinar.
Good evening to everybody, whoever present.
Good evening, sir. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much. You have been busy throughout the day and still you have taken time to be part of today's webinar.
Thank you.
A very warm welcome to all the participants and distinguished panelists who have joined us just now for today's webinar. I can see more and more participants are pouring in. The room is still open, so all participants are requested. This event shall be live streamed on our YouTube channel, BZICAM New Delhi also. But certificate feedback form link for certificate of participation generation shall not be shared on the same. So any of your colleagues or friends who plan to join from the YouTube link, the room is still open. You can quickly tell them to join the WebEx room itself. All participants who have joined us, kindly ensure you can access the chat window. In short time, we shall be starting with today's webinar. A very good evening and a very warm welcome to all participants who have just joined us. So with the permission of all my distinguished panelists and expert speakers for today's session, we now start with today's session. A very good evening to all distinguished panelists and participants. Bharati Vidyapeeth Institute of Computer Applications and Management, BVI CAM, in association with Computer Science Chapter of IEEE Delhi Section, Consultants Network Affinity, CNA Group of IEEE Delhi Section, Life Member Affinity, Consultants Network Affinity, CNA Group of IEEE Delhi Section, Life Member Affinity, LMA Group of IEEE Delhi Section, Inter-Society Relations, IRS Standing Committee of IEEE Delhi Section, Industry Relations and Site Standing Committee of IEEE Delhi Section, with the Associations of Computer Society of India, SAFA Society, ISTE Delhi Section, and IETE Delhi Center, welcomes you all to this webinar on cyber forensics, investigation techniques and tools for contemporary cyber crimes. In the words of Earl Devaney, former Inspector General of the United States Department of the Interior and former chairman of the Recovery, Accountability and Transparency Board, in today's world, people put almost everything on computers. We need the forensics capability to go in and retrieve that information of the company's network. This quote in the current times is not just true for business and enterprises, but every individual who has a digital identity is at a risk of attack. Today's webinar is aimed to unveil cybersecurity frameworks, including the 5 most popular NIST cybersecurity framework, describing 5 key aspects of computer and information system security, viz. Identity protect, detect, respond, and recover. Most organizations and enterprises that take cybersecurity with some sort of seriousness implement measures to identify cybersecurity risk, protect their systems using cybersecurity tools and practices, and enable detection mechanism to detect attacks. Other organizations that have stronger cybersecurity practices go a step further to also actively respond and recover from a state of cyber attack. However, only few organizations have trained resources to perform post-attack analysis and investigation. Post-attack analysis and investigation is important to not only prevent a reoccurrence of the cyber attack, but to also bring the perpetrators to justice. The webinar is aimed to discuss the field of cyber forensic and its subdomains, with computer forensic, network forensics, mobile device forensics, email forensics, and the more contemporary cloud and IoT forensics. But before we start with the webinar, I would first take this opportunity to welcome amongst us our distinguished panelists for the day. We are privileged to have amongst us a galaxy of experts. I would first welcome Professor Subrata Mukhopadhyay, Chairperson, Consultants Network Affinity, CNA Group, and former Chairperson of IEEE Delhi Section. I would now request Professor Subrata Mukhopadhyay to commence this session with his welcome address. Sir, you are on mute.
Bandwidth. Okay, thank you, Dr. Ritika Vashan. Good evening to all who are present. As I see now, we have crossed 800 actually. And it 2 plus panelists, 6 must be there because one is double. So it's definitely an important topic. Today's topic is cyber forensics, investigation techniques and tools for contemporary cyber crimes. Very important, the word contemporary, because we have gone to digital age. So many things are backed up by this, as already Ritika told. And everyday's life, it has penetrated like anything. So fraud is always there, possibility. We have to protect ourselves. Of course, there are people, crimes, against which justice is to be brought so that it is not a recurring thing in future. So we have to be very careful about all these issues because a lot of topics we have discussed, and this is definitely something forensic or a crime related matter. We'll definitely hear from the speaker, Nishit Naran, all the details and whatever possible from our side as users we may be trying to do, but still we should not leave it. Question is of seriousness and all these things, particularly what you see when it pinches the pocket and banks tell that we are not aware of this thing. Of course, from their side also, they are updating their software prevention in recent times. Even 1st July, I have seen SBI doing a lot of taking measures and all these things. But at the same time, they should not slow the slower the process of people's dependency on the information technology. That is the thing should be there. We should not avoid it. We should use it and freely, and anytime we want it, we should be in a position to do it. Thank you. With this, we welcome you to this webinar. This is what, 47 or 45th? I don't know.
So this is 47th.
47. So I'm correct. So no problem. Okay. Hand over to Dr. Ritika Vashan.
Thank you, sir. I would now welcome amongst us our expert speaker, Professor Nishit Narang, Associate Professor, WILPD CSIS BITS Pilani. Professor Nishit Narang is an Associate Professor at the WILPD CSIS Department of BITS Pilani. His area of interest include computer and communication networks, cyber security, cyber physical systems, and IoT. He has over 2 decades of IT industry experience and was working as Assistant Vice President Technology at Altran, now Capgemini Engineering, in his last full-time role in the IT industry. Professor Nishit has executed multiple projects over his 23 years of IT industry association in areas of mobile and wireless communication, IoT solutions, and embedded systems. Nishit has also taught multiple courses on wireless systems, real-time systems, advanced computer networks, cloud, IoT, and enterprise security and cyber forensics. Nishit is a BTech from IIT Delhi, MS from BITS Pilani, and is a PhD candidate from IIT Delhi. Besides multiple research publications, Nishit is also the author of 4 technical books in the area of mobile and communication networks published by McGraw-Hill and sold internationally. I welcome you today to this session, sir, and I would now request you to kindly enlighten the House. So over to you, Professor Nishit.
Thank you, Dr. Ritika and Professor Subrata for a very nice introduction and introducing the topic to everyone who's attending this webinar. I would really like to thank all of you, including BBI CAM, for giving the opportunity to talk about this very important topic for which we all have gathered today, which is the topic of cyber forensics. So a very interesting topic in this age today, where we will talk about how the domain of forensics works in the cyber space, and we will talk about the techniques used to investigate and also the tools that are available to basically investigate and collect evidence against the newer age cyber crimes. So cyber crimes have evolved over the years, and accordingly, we need to be basically following up with them. And this is exactly what the intent of this talk is, to talk about how we can improve the investigation techniques and tools for the contemporary cyber crimes. So our talk today will be structured using these four key sections. We will introduce the whole domain of cyber forensics, basically giving a definition to what cyber forensics is all about, and also what skill sets it requires, right? So we will talk about the subdomains within cyber forensics. We will talk about the skills required and also the associated challenges involved in cyber forensics. We will talk about how the whole world of cyber crime has evolved towards the new age crime. So we will talk about some of the contemporary cyber crimes, and accordingly how the whole world of cyber forensics has also evolved to basically catch up with the evolutions in the internet space and associated with it the cyber crimes. And towards the end, because a lot of our participants today are students, I would like to end this talk talking a little bit about the careers and opportunities that they can have in this space of cyber forensics. So that's how we are structured. So before I get into the cyber forensics world, let me just start with a quotation from one of the most important persons on the face of this earth, the 34th President of the United States, President Dwight Eisenhower. And he said, "We will bankrupt ourselves in the vain search for absolute security." Now, if you ponder a moment on what he said, I mean, at first it may look to be a very pessimistic statement coming from the President of the United States, saying we are going to bankrupt ourselves in the vain search of absolute security. I mean, the vain is something which sounds too pessimistic in this whole quotation. But a little pondering helps us realize that he's only talking about the fact which we all know is the truth. Right? There is literally nothing that we can call as absolute security. So all that we do all around us is to try to make our solutions, our software, our systems more secure. But we are never at a state where we can say we have achieved the state of absolute security. And if we are basically trying to chase absolute security, then he rightly said, we will just bankrupt ourselves, but we don't hope to achieve the state of absolute security. Now, why is this statement so important in the context of what we discussed today? Right? What it really means is that while the whole system around us, the internet is evolving, right, and the cyberspace is evolving, we can only try to make it secure, but we can never be sure that it is absolute secure. And therefore, incidents on the cyberspace are bound to happen. So I introduced the topic by saying, how is the internet been evolving? I mean, it's just a context to get started. So we start from an era of pre-internet when the only form of communication between people was human-to-human connect, right? We used to talk over fixed and mobile telephone systems, and SMS became a very, very important service for a non-intrusive communication. The first major signs of the internet started with the WWW, the World Wide Web, when email, information, entertainment, content started becoming available over the internet. And because it was so much driven by content, some people also like to call it as the era of the internet of content. Evolution on the basic World Wide Web happened with what people like to call as the Web 2.0, where a lot of e-productivity, e-commerce solutions started to become popular. And because of the services getting popular over the internet, we also like to call it as the Internet of Services. With the advent of the social media, right, tools like Skype, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of us are so familiar with these social media platforms today. It has changed the way we connect with each other. It has changed the way we meet people, and it's basically brought about an internet of people. And today, as we stand, we are talking about not just computing systems, not just people, not just applications. We are talking about machines getting connected to the internet. Our everyday machines becoming smart enough to talk to each other over the internet. We are talking about the Internet of Things. Right? The whole evolution has been driven by technology. The advent of smart networks brought us to the Internet of Content. Advent of smart IT platforms and services got us to the Internet of Services. The advent of smartphones and the associated applications got us to the social media era. And today we are seeing with all these smart devices coming around us, we are entering into the Internet of Things era. Now, while the internet has been evolving, we are seeing the world of cyber crimes is also evolving alongside. Right? So, when we were in the pre-internet era, the only kind of attacks or cyber concerns we were worried about were man-in-the-middle attacks. Somebody in between trying to tap into my telephone call and listening to what I'm trying to communicate with the other person, man-in-the-middle attacks. Those are the kind of attacks people used to be worried about. As the internet started to become popular, people started worrying about hacked accounts, loss of username, password, identity loss, identity theft. Those kind of things started to come in. Internet of Services started to see a different kind of cybersecurity threat called the distributed denial of service attacks, right? So we're talking about services, and the attackers think it is very, very wise of them to start bringing down these services by enabling distributed denial of service attacks. Right? They're targeting the services. They're trying to bring down these services. In the Internet of People, we are today worried about data privacy. We are worried about identity theft, identity fraud. Our online cyber presence has become such an important factor of our being that a lot of us resides on the cyberspace today. And with so much of us lying on the cyberspace, our avatar being on the cyberspace, we are worried about how much privacy do we retain today in terms of the data that is available on the internet pertaining to us. Right? And as we move to the Internet of Things, we are saying billions of devices going to be connected to the very old internet, and so many devices that we use today, like our cars, our refrigerators, our coffee machines, all of them getting connected to the internet. It's only wise to say that the security concerns that we've seen evolving are only going to get very much more accentuated. So we are living in a world where the security threat is very much live and ticking. Now, it's not as if the cyberspace is lacking behind on this aspect. There are a lot of cybersecurity frameworks that exist, and one of the very important cybersecurity framework is the NIST cybersecurity framework. Some of you may have heard of this name. The framework is a full circle. Why do I say that? Because it tries to solve every piece of the jigsaw puzzle that makes the cybersecurity framework, right? So they try to talk about identification of cybersecurity threats, right? So things like risk assessment on the right table, it shows all the activities that go with it, the identify phase. They talk about risk assessment. They talk about implementing a risk management strategy, tracking of assets as part of asset management. So identification of the cybersecurity threats. Of course, identification doesn't solve the problem. The problem gets solved with protection mechanisms. So with protection mechanisms, there are things like access control, awareness and training of the involved personnel, introducing data security and information protection practices, and introducing newer age protective technologies. Right? So that is what helps us protect our systems and solutions. And as we said, no matter how much we protect, the system cannot be foolproof. So incidents are bound to occur. An important part of the cybersecurity framework is the aspect of detection. Right? So anomalies and events need to be detected. We have to be in a state of continuous security monitoring. Our detection processes have to be well defined, and they should be capable of detecting intrusions, attacks, anomalous events. So that is the detection phase. Now, most organizations stop at this part of your cybersecurity framework. So they will identify what are the risks to their organization. They will try to protect them, and they will implement some sort of measures to detect these incidents. But the really good organizations will go a step further and try to respond to these cybersecurity attacks. They will try to do good amount of planning towards how these attacks need to be responded with. They will analyze the attacks. They will try to build measures to mitigate something like this happening in the future by introducing improvements to their system. That is what means by this phase response. But another important phase of this framework which closes the circle is the recovery phase. So after you've been hit with an attack, it's very important that you're open in your communications. You have to let your stakeholders know that an incident has happened. You are recovering from it. This is your plan to recover. These are the improvements that you're going to build into your system so that the same kind of attacks don't happen again. All of this is an important part of the recovery phase. So the cybersecurity framework provided by NIST covers the full circle of how a cybersecurity team should look at implementing the various procedures to safeguard their systems and solutions. So that's what cybersecurity does. But cyber forensics goes in parallel to cyber security. So while cybersecurity is all about identification, protection, detection, recovery, and response, cyber forensic is a domain which tries to gather evidence so as to get the perpetrators of the crime to book, right? Get them to a court of law, get them adequately punished for what they've done. So the world of cyber forensics, and literally, if you look at the definition that's provided by the search security on TechTarget, they say cyber forensics is the application of investigation and analysis techniques to gather and preserve evidence. The focus is on evidence from a particular computing device in a way that is suitable for presentation in a court of law. Right? So we all know in the non-cyberspace, right? In the physical world, if I may use that word, there are plenty of crimes that we see all around us. And there's a law enforcement agency which is doing something analogous to what we've stated over here. They're trying to gather evidence, right? Create a case out of it such that it is suitable enough to take to a court of law and let the judiciary decide what kind of a punishment is suitable to the perpetrator of the crime, right? But the same kind of thing we are talking of today in the cyberspace. As the cyber crimes grow, we are looking at these crimes in the cyber world and trying to gather evidence from the cyberspace, from all the devices, from all the technologies that create the cyberspace, and we want to gather the evidence from there and create a case out of it. I mean, the evidence should be in a form that is acceptable in a court of law. Okay? So that's what cyber forensics is all about. What are the kind of crimes that we are talking of in the cyberspace? We are talking about three broad level categories of crimes. We are talking about the basic forms of computer crimes, which we say are crimes committed with computers. There are crimes which are computer related crimes, which means crimes that in some way make use of a computer. I mean, which means, for example, child pornography. Right? It's something that can happen without computers, but it proliferates very, very fast when using a computer. So it's not a crime which is only computer based or which cannot be committed otherwise, but it's something that can proliferate very, very fast if they make use of a computer. So we call them computer related crimes. And the most important today are the cyber crimes, right, which are the most prevalent today, because we're not just talking about crimes which are committed with computers, but we are talking about crimes which use computers and also involve the internet. Okay? So when we say cyber crimes, we are really looking at computer-based crimes or computer crimes or computer-related crimes which involve the internet. Now, an important piece of cyber forensics is the digital forensic science. So what is this science all about? It's digital forensics is a science in its own self, right? As per the definition given by in the digital forensics research workshop, they say digital forensic science is the use of scientifically derived and proven methods towards, and note these words, towards preservation, collection, validation, identification, analysis, interpretation, documentation, and presentation of all the digital evidence that has been derived from digital sources for the purpose of facilitating or furthering the reconstruction of events found to be criminal or in helping to anticipate unauthorized actions shown to be disruptive to planned operations. So what they're basically trying to stress on are the scientific methods to not only collect evidence, but also to preserve it, analyze it, validate it, interpret it, right? And also document and present it, because documentation and presentation is what will eventually go to the court of law. And it's not just about all the evidence collected post-mortem, which means after an event has happened. Of course, that does happen because it helps to reconstruct the events that are criminal events. But at times, it also helps prevent certain events. You can anticipate certain unauthorized actions which are shown to be disruptive to planned operations. So that's the definition, but we'll come to more next level details on what this means by looking at the context of cyber forensics and how this science, the digital forensic science, fits in. Right? So we've talked about the whole world of cyber crimes, right? Whether it deals with homeland security, which is mostly your immigration rules and policies, whether it deals with information security, corporate espionage, child pornography, the traditional crimes or the new age contemporary crimes, variety of cyber crimes that we're dealing with. Right? Digital forensics is that science which helps us gather all the evidence related to these crimes. Okay? And therefore, digital forensics forms a very important piece of cyber forensics. So why do I see cyber forensics as something overlapping with digital forensics, but not exactly digital forensics? Well, there are a lot of things that happens outside of the digital forensics world. I mean, there are a lot of on-field operations, going to site, gathering information, tagging your evidence. All of those happens in a more physical world, using manual processes. So those are away from the digital forensic science, right? But digital forensic science does play a very important and key role in the whole world of cyber forensics. So if we look at the broad level domains or areas who use digital forensics today, then they are the law enforcement agencies, with our courts, our judiciary. Right? They are our military operations, who are involved in digital information warfare today. And they involve the business and the industry who are worried about their critical infrastructure protection. Right? As we go through this talk, we will look at case studies which help us understand why all of these three parties, the business and the industry, military operations, law enforcement agencies, have a need for digital forensic research. Why do they need this? Right? And this table on the right shows their need for it. I mean, it says primarily for the law enforcement agencies, the primary objective is prosecution, right? And therefore, the environment that they're operating is after the fact, after the incident has happened, right? So the incident has already happened. They're trying to now gather evidence, reconstruct events, create a foolproof case to be able to prosecute the perpetrator. But for a lot of others, including the military and the business, there are more than the primary objective. For the military, the primary objective is continuity of their operations. For the business and the industry, it's similar. It's the availability of their service. Okay? Prosecution becomes their secondary objective. They are more worried about their operations continuing. And therefore, the environment that they're operating in is not after the incident has happened. They're operating in a more real-time environment, which means they are monitoring events in more real time. They're trying to gather evidence, information about incidents in a more real time so as to be proactively assessing them, assessing maybe this is going to be a more bigger attack that could happen and trying to prevent it. Right? We all know how the military operates, right? We are all hearing about the issue with drones entering into the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and how it is being foreseen that could be a step in towards a larger incident, right? So that is where we are saying the environment is more real time rather than after the fact. Now, the digital forensic process, as we also said in the definition, is a very big or a complex process. I mean, it involves a lot of different steps. It involves identification of the right evidence, right? As we will see, it is not always very easy to identify where the evidence should be collected from. So identification of the evidence, and then collecting the evidence, preserving it, in examining it in labs, which we call as forensic labs, analyzing what we are getting out of that evidence, interpreting that evidence, documenting it in a way that can be understood by the court of law, and then presenting that evidence in the court of law. All of these are very important steps in the whole digital forensics process. So, as I said, identification itself is a very complex task. Take a moment to just look at all the pictures that I've tried to put in on this slide, and you will see there are some devices which are very obvious, which you think are related to cybercrimes. You have a computer or a server machine. You have a set of storage devices. But there's so many other devices that you see on this page which may not be the obvious suspects. You have a refrigerator at home. Now, normally when a law enforcement guy visits a crime scene and he sees the refrigerator, he will not have the obvious notion of it being a device that would have some evidence. But we know today with the Internet of Things, our devices are getting smart, and a refrigerator could be holding certain evidence. There could be storage devices which are not easily visible. I mean, it could be created in a shape of a toy. Okay? There could be another storage device which is, let's say, a human thumb, mimicking a human thumb. So many ways to hide these devices away from the common eye. It's not obvious where the evidence is lying. So for a very well-trained forensics investigator, each step of this investigation process becomes a very important piece, and they're well trained on each of these steps. How do you identify devices? Where should the evidence be collected from? How do you collect that evidence? See, this is an important piece. You don't want to destroy evidence in the process of collecting it. You don't want to destroy the primary source of your evidence. All that you want to do is to make a copy of that primary source, let the primary source of evidence remain untouched. Any post-examination analysis you want to do, you do on a secondary copy of your evidence. You need to preserve the evidence, right, so that it's not tampered with, because eventually at some point in time, you will have to present that evidence in a court of law. So a new age digital forensic investigator is today trained in each of these steps of the digital forensic process. So let's look at a little bit about the history of cyber forensics, how this whole domain of cyber forensics has evolved. So historically, we talk about 2 or 3 key domains that have been the older domains in cyber forensics. They involve computer forensics, as the name suggests. The domain of computer, or the subdomain of computer forensics, focuses on computing devices. Now, these are your everyday desktops, laptops, workstations. That is what computer forensics deals with. I mean, it's extracting the evidence from the computing devices, which have been used in some form of cybercrime. Now, what it does require is very good domain understanding of how these computing devices operate. You need to understand the boot process. You need to understand the file systems. You need to understand how information is stored in the form of registries on Windows operating systems, or configuration files on a Linux operating system. What are the functions of the operating system? This is something you need to have deep understanding of. And then forensics investigators in the domain of computer forensics know how to acquire data or evidence out of these computing devices using both static and live acquisition methods. So what do we mean by this? So your computing device could be powered off, switched off. Okay? In which case you don't want to power it on, because powering it on may change the state of your machine. You don't want to change the state of it. So you do a static acquisition of data, which means you connect the device to another live device and try to read the hard disk by mounting it onto another, let's say, Linux system, or you try to create a virtual machine and then load the hard disk of your computing system as a virtual disk on your virtual machine and then try to acquire data. So you basically try to do a static acquisition, but at times your machine is already powered on and running, and there you also want to collect the volatile information out of it, which is the information stored in your RAM. So it involves live acquisition of data from a running powered on system. Right? So this is where the world of computer forensics deals with. The domain of network forensics is more dealing with crimes that involve the communication or the computer network. So it's more involved with systematic tracking of the incoming and outgoing traffic on your network, and to ascertain how a particular attack was carried out. So basically what you're trying to do is to determine the cause of abnormal traffic on your network, whether it is a consequence of some internal bugs or some attackers trying to attack your network. And in network forensics, it is mostly live acquisition of information that is especially useful. I mean, it's a running system, it's a running communication network, and you're observing some abnormal traffic. You try to gather evidence as part of live acquisition of evidence. And then you need to understand, as I said, a lot of how the data storage devices are organized. So the storage device forensics. You need understanding of the data storage devices for data acquisition. Now, these devices could be your older SCSI disks or the IDE disks or the SATA drives. These could be the CD drives or the CD read-write, DVD drives, or these could also be a lot of your redundant array of independent disks, the RAID systems. Okay? And we know RAID itself has so many different configurations starting from RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 2, RAID 3 to RAID 10. It's a very complex domain itself. So what I'm trying to drive at is no single person is an expert in all areas, right? You may be a very good computer forensics expert, but you may have limited understanding of how a network operates. You may be a very good network forensics expert, but you may not understand how RAID systems are organized, and therefore you may not be very well versed with how data storage devices are structured, how data is stored on them, and how do we extract evidence out of it. The whole world is a multidisciplinary field, right? And therefore quite complex for a single person to deal with. Now, some of the challenges, as we were just starting to talk about in this world of computer and network forensics, is that, as I said, it requires very good engineering skills. Now, it's not an application domain, it's requiring a lot of deep engineering skills. You need understanding of the different operating systems and file systems. You should understand how people hide information on a computer machine, whether they use file manipulation techniques, whether they use disk manipulation techniques, whether they use encryption as a method for hiding information, whether they use steganography. Now, steganography is a Greek word that means hidden writing. So people use images, graphical images, and somehow hide valuable pieces of secret information inside a very plain looking image. The image might look to be from a beach vacation, let's say, that you took a while ago. But inside that beach vacation picture, which seems harmless, is some hidden secret information. That's what steganography is all about. You need to know how deleted files can be recovered and handled. You need to handle compressed file systems. You need to handle encrypted file systems. So today, Microsoft systems, for example, come with whole disk encryption using Microsoft BitLocker. How do you, and these are password protected, or right, they are encrypted using a passphrase. How do you recover information from encrypted file systems? Right, and today we are moving towards this whole notion of virtual machines residing on physical computing infrastructure. And virtual machines, as we all understand, is a virtual concept. I mean, they would die out as soon as you remove the virtual machine from your hard disk. So if a virtual machine has been used to create an attack scenario, how do you recover evidence related to it? Right? So it's a whole world of challenges associated with the domain of computer forensics. Similarly, network forensics is no easy meat. It's a long, tedious process. You need to be up to date on the latest methods that intruders use to infiltrate the network. So basically, you have to get into the mind of the intruder, learn how he operates, right? And we will talk about a few techniques people have used to do this, learn how intruders work. We will talk about this. And as I said, you need to do more of live acquisition, right? Not the typical forensics procedure, but more live acquisition so that you can take care of volatile information. So in network forensics, the order of volatility is important, which means how long can a piece of information last on a system? And how soon should I get into action so that I can gather the evidence before it is lost because it is volatile information. Okay? Now, fortunately for the investigators, it doesn't start from scratch. There are a lot of tools that are readily available in the market, especially for the older cyber forensic domains, the computer forensics and network forensics area. There are plenty of tools available. There are general purpose hex editors, tools that can help you visualize any information as hexadecimal information, right? So you could look for example, known patterns of hexadecimal information to say, okay, this file looks to be a JPEG image because the header of this file represents a pattern which I know to be for a JPEG image, right? So general purpose hex editors can help us visualize a lot of information hex in a hex manner. There are tools available for examining disk partitions. There are tools available for handling disk encryptions. There are tools available to easily read registry information using registry editors. There are plenty of toolkits and libraries that are available in market. Toolkits like some of these are very popular in the market. Sleuthkit and associated front-end tool called Autopsy. So Sleuthkit is more of a back-end library of tools. Autopsy is more of a front-end GUI. Right? There are Cellbrite's black bag technology tools. There are ProDiscover forensic toolset. Now these are toolkits, which means they come with a set of tools that help to different pieces of evidence gathering, that help you with the evidence gathering in variety of ways. There are some live CDs that are available. These are called Linux live CDs, which help you do static acquisition without tampering or changing the state of the machine from which you are gathering information, the static acquisition that we talked of. Of course, you can also use the more down to earth kind of Linux shell commands. There are tools that help you do remote acquisition. So even remotely from a distant location, you could use these tools to do remote acquisition of information. There are tools that help do password recovery, because if you need a passphrase to decrypt some file systems, then there are password recovery tools, open source tools like John the Ripper, or proprietary tools from Access Data like the PRTK. And there are a lot of steganalysis tools which help decode steganography, right? Information that has been hidden using steganography. So a variety of tool sets targeting a lot of different areas of computer forensics are already there in the market. Similarly, because network forensics is also a slightly older domain, there are a lot of tools that we have in the market. All that we need to know is we need to be trained to use them. There are packet sniffers that help examine network traffic. Tools like TCP dump, tools like Wireshark. They can help you sniff the ongoing traffic on the network, examine it in more real-time fashion. Sysinternals is a collection of free tools that is targeted for the Windows-based products, and it consists of a tool set which helps you examine different appliances on your devices on your network. Similarly, there's a PS tool suite which is created using sysinternals, right? So a lot of devices and tools already available for network forensics. One important project that I just want to highlight at this point is the HoneyNet project. As I said, you need to get into the mind of the intruder to understand how he operates. And the HoneyNet project is actually a project that has been created with that mindset. What it tries to do is to create a honey trap, right? So you basically are creating a system which for an intruder or for an attacker looks to be a vulnerable system. And behind the system, you've tried to create a hype that there is some very valuable information that is lurking around. Now, this intruder, this basically makes a honey trap for him. He's excited about it. It's a vulnerable system. There is a lot of potentially good information that he can gather if he can get into the system, and it goes ahead, tries to crack the system. And in doing that, the examiners who are runtime monitoring what this intruder is going to do can gather a lot of tips and tricks of how he tries to break into the system. Right? So the HoneyNet project is all about trying to create a honey trap for the attackers and trying to learn how these attackers operate, what are the tools that they use, what are the tricks and vulnerabilities in the system that they try to exploit. All in all, the idea is to get into their mind, try to learn how they operate. Okay? Now, while we talked about these historical forensic domains, the computer and network forensics, the world of cyber crimes is evolving. So there are these new age contemporary cyber crimes that we have to deal with today. There are email crimes that are happening because of emails, phishing and spoofing, right, via emails. Right, one of the very noteworthy email scams was the 419 or the Nigerian scam. There's a whole Wikipedia page about it, so interested people can go about and read about it. But I think we all understand what is phishing or spoofing via emails, right? Email scams are a big part of our life today. There is cyber terrorism, which means a deliberate, politically or religiously motivated attack. It's more of a terrorist attack, but in the cyberspace. So it's an attack against data compilation or computer programs or information systems. The intent is to disrupt or deny service, right? Or in some way acquire certain information which helps disrupt the social, physical, or political infrastructure of a target. So it's like a terrorist attack, but in the cyberspace, right? And the typical methods that cyber terrorists use today are viruses and worms which are spread over the cyberspace. Okay? Another kind of contemporary cyber crime is child pornography or child enticement or child exploitation. And the way law enforcement agencies are trying to tackle this are by doing sting operations. So similar to the HoneyNet project I talk about, they basically go about creating honeypots. They use the same strategy as predators use. They get onto these social media sites, try to behave as if they are a child, and lure these predators to them before they can actually perform a sting operation on them and capture them. Plenty of online activities that we see happening around us. There are online pharmacies which are selling drugs without prescriptions. There are online gambling in regions where gambling is a prohibited activity. There is cyber stalking and harassment. There is cyber bullying, a variety of ways in which online frauds are happening. There is the internet auction fraud, which means you're getting into an auction, but the prices are being jacked up artificially. There is ISP jacking, which means you're trying to get onto your internet service provider and via your internet service provider to a legitimate site, but somebody misdirects you to a wrong site. Right? That's the whole notion of ISP jacking. So a lot of other illegitimate online activities that happen all around us. And with IoT coming into the picture, the Internet of Things being the latest generation of the internet today, we are looking at IoT attacks which are attacks that are happening either via compromised IoT devices. These are our everyday devices like the refrigerators, printers, our connected cars, our coffee machines. These are the IoT devices that are being compromised to launch an attack. Or there are attacks on installations or critical infrastructures which have been set up using IoT solutions, using devices, using sensors, using controllers, and the cloud-based solutions, right? So there are attacks on these installations which are engineered as IoT solutions, right? So there are those kind of IoT attacks. So just to get an idea of the kind of attacks we see around us, look at a few slides that I'm just going to show. February 18, 2021, the Hindustan Times comes up with a news article saying phishing attacks are targeting officials through rogue emails seem to be coming from government IDs. Right? So the summary of this article was that the mails that seem to be coming from government addresses, these are addresses nic.in and gov.in, but these are not the right, these are spoofed emails, right? They contain contaminated document attachments. And once you open these document attachments, there's a malware that can get activated. And this malware then provides backdoor entry to the hackers to get into government personal computers, right? And therefore gather all the secret information that is hidden on those government personal computers, right? So this is a form of attack that happens via email spoofing. Right? One of the very well-known attacks in the history of our cyberspace, which was actually backed by compromised IoT devices, is the 2016 DIN DNS service attack. There's again a whole Wikipedia page around it. It's an attack that was orchestrated using IoT devices, and these are devices like printers, IP cameras, home gateways. There were tens of millions of devices that were broken into and gotten infected with the Mirai malware. They were remotely controlled and used in the attack. Now, in the attack, these devices were just creating a distributed denial of service attack by bombarding the DNS servers with DNS requests. Right? We all know the DNS is the heart of the internet. If the DNS servers go down, then you're not able to resolve a URL something like www.amazon.in into an IP address, right? And unless you can do that, you can't reach the site. So these attackers took control of tens of millions of IoT devices to generate 1.2 terabit per second of DNS query request onto DNS servers to create the largest distributed denial of service attack on record. And if you see this picture on the right, it shows the parts of the North America that were impacted. A large part of North America, entire cyberspace, all websites were affected. Below is a list of all websites that got impacted. Everything from Amazon.com, Airbnb, to GitHub, things that we use for our everyday work in GitHub and all, to Slack, right? To Quora, all websites popularly used by each one of us were not accessible during the attack. So this is one form of attack where IoT devices are compromised and then they are used to create a different kind of attack on DNS, let's say DNS servers using distributed denial of service. But there's this other form of attacks which I talked about where infrastructure, which is set up as IoT solutions, is attacked. Right? This article in the Times of India, August 13, 2010, said India sees the most IoT attacks in the quarter in April to June. Not only that, it said India was amongst the most attacked nations of the world for the second consecutive quarter. So April to June wasn't the only quarter; it was actually the second consecutive quarter when India was the most attacked nation of the world in terms of the IoT attacks. Right? So that is where we are not just talking about attacks happening in the globe; we are actually closer home. Right? More recent, March 2, 2021, Hindustan Times tells us that Chinese hackers or attackers tried to target India's energy infrastructure. They attacked our power infrastructure by gaining access to the computer networks that control these power infrastructure. And there was speculation that last year there was a big power outage that happened in Mumbai. It could be a result of this sabotage. And there was a malware known as the ShadowPad, which was used to target at least 10 different district power sector organizations to basically commit this kind of attack. Now, this kind of attack are not just limited to government infrastructures or critical infrastructures. It's a challenge for the enterprise or the organization as well. There's this set of researchers, E. Ronen, A. Shamir, and all, who basically showed in 2017, they published a paper which showed that everyday wireless communication technologies, radio protocols like Zigbee, which are so often used in the enterprise space, can be hacked into. There are flaws in these radio protocols which can be broken into, and they can control your enterprise ecosystem. So they demonstrated how light bulbs installed in an enterprise office could be controlled, and they were basically controlled to start flashing an SOS message in Morse code. So basically, these light bulbs were flashing on and off in a Morse code manner, indicating an SOS message. And they could also show that this malware could spread like a pathogen to infect the other devices in the enterprise network as well. Right? Not just enterprise systems; it's a personal challenge as well. Bluetooth has been known to have vulnerabilities. And by exploiting vulnerabilities in the Bluetooth stack, hackers have been able to get control of your personal devices, like things like your smart bands. And that helps them track your location. They can stalk you, they can abuse you. So it basically leads to an issue with personal safety and security. In summary, there's a lot of data privacy challenge with all the IoT devices that you use at home. A smart hacker, can extract a lot of information from your smart TV. He can look at all traffic that's going through your Wi-Fi router if he can hack into it. If he can hack into your voice assistants on your phones, right? Or if he can hack into your connected cars, or if he can even get into your firmware, hack into the firmware that controls your security cameras, right? Or we already saw this example where medical fitness devices could be hacked into because of the vulnerabilities in the Bluetooth stack. There's so much of valuable information about you that a smart hacker can extract just by hacking into all of these devices that you use at your home. Okay? So what are we talking about? We are talking about new age crimes. We are talking about new age technology evolution. We are talking about new age cyber world, but we are also talking about the contemporary cyber crimes that are coming because of them. Accordingly, our world of cyber forensics can no longer be happy with computer forensics, network forensics, and that's it. No, the cyber forensic domain has to grow. Today we talk about email forensics, right? Email forensics is a domain of subdomain of forensics where we learn how to investigate crimes that have been conducted using spoofing or phishing via emails, right? So you need to understand how different email messaging protocols work. You need to understand how to investigate email messages using the header information available in email messages, or be able to get into email servers, understand how email server logs are organized, read those logs, try to extract valuable information from them. You also need to trace the route an email has taken. I mean, an email may seem to be coming from a specific address, but it may have come from elsewhere. So you need to do network tracing of emails using routers and firewall logs to see where the paths that the email has taken over the network. Right? So this is the world subdomain of email forensics. A lot of crimes today are happening using mobile devices, right? There's a wealth of information that we all store on our cell phones. There are pictures, there are files, there are passwords, right? There's so much of information that gets stored on our cell phones. And if by some means the cell phone can be hacked into, right? Let's say I just downloaded a malicious application, right, on my smartphone from unknown or untrusted source, and this application is just stealing information stored on my smartphone. So there are crimes that can be committed using mobile devices, right? There are crimes targeting mobile devices. There are crimes committed using mobile devices. So mobile device forensics deals in this space. It requires an understanding of how mobile devices are organized, their operating system. So these operating systems are not like our Windows or Mac or Linux operating systems on computer devices. These are more Android, iOS kind of operating systems. You need to understand the file system behind them and the storage systems and how they are organized on a mobile device. Right? There are a lot of other challenges which we will just talk about. Then there is the world of cloud forensics. So cloud computing is becoming a piece of our everyday life, right? So cloud forensics combines the digital forensic science with the world of cloud computing. It requires investigators to work with cloud computing assets, things like virtual servers, virtual networks, storage, virtual storage devices, right? Applications deployed on virtual computing systems or VMs, virtual machines in a cloud environment, much more than that, right? And of course, there is IoT forensics for the IoT attacks that we just talked of in the last few slides where we talked about IoT-based attacks. So IoT is a combination technology. We see IoT as a combination of multiple technology zones. There are these devices, the IoT devices, which are more embedded devices. There is a network which connects these devices together. There are those cloud-based systems which are actually providing the intelligent services to these devices. So we look at IoT as a set of three technology zones: device, network, cloud. And accordingly, when we talk about IoT forensics, we are talking about cloud forensics, we're talking about network forensics, we're talking about device forensics, but with a lot of new age challenges that we will just talk about. And we are talking in IoT forensics about gathering evidence from these home appliances, from cars, from tag readers, sensor nodes, medical implants in humans or animals, right, or any other IoT devices that you can think of. This is the new age cyber forensics. This is the contemporary cyber forensics dealing with the contemporary cyber crimes. But there are a lot of challenges in this space. Right? Of course, this is new. So there's a lack of tools available in this space, but there are other challenges associated with the domain itself. Well, for one, email forensics, for example, requires you to analyze information from the victim's computer. You don't have access to the perpetrator's computer. Unlike computer forensics, where you, let's say, get a search warrant, you raid a site, you collect all computing machinery which you believe could have been used to commit a cyber crime, and where you have access to the perpetrator's computer. In the case of email forensics, you are mostly dealing with victim's computer. You're trying to backtrack by starting from a victim's computer and then trying to backtrack how the attack could have happened. With mobile device forensics, there are different set of challenges. We all know that these devices are backed with battery power. So very soon they would run out of power. A lot of these devices are synchronized actively with cloud-based servers or with personal computers. So as soon as the mobile phone synchronizes information with a personal computer or with a cloud, it can delete the information on the mobile device. Right? So basically what we're saying is that mobile devices have volatile memory. If they run out of power, this volatile information could be lost. If they synchronize certain information with the cloud server or with your personal computer, you may lose that information from the mobile device because it may have been synced onto a backend server. Cloud forensics has its own challenges. You are dependent on cloud service providers, the likes of Amazon Web Services, Azure cloud service providers, Google Cloud. You don't have physical access to hardware. You rely on them. You are dependent on them to gather evidence. In a lot of instances, cloud service providers have been known to hide logs. They even have at times policies that prevent you from collecting logs from their servers. And investigators who are doing cloud forensic investigations at a lot of time do not have full control on who are the people who are allowed to collect evidence. See, this is huge infrastructure we are talking of. CSPs may not allow you to tamper into their systems because you may bring down their system. So they may say, okay, our technicians will collect the information for you. Tell us what information you need, we will collect it for you. But then you don't have full control. You don't even know if these people are well trained to collect the right evidence. Right? Plus the fact that these cloud servers are often located across multiple geographies, multiple countries, and therefore the data that you want may be spanning across geographical boundaries. So it's a big challenge in itself on how can you collect this information which is residing across the globe, across geographies. Right? IoT forensics has its own challenges. Of course, cloud forensics is a part of IoT forensics, and therefore IoT forensics has these challenges that we talked of. But there are challenges related to the devices. Right? There are challenges related to the mobile phones that we talked of. There is a challenge because of the limited storage that is available in these IoT devices. We are sure that data that is stored in these IoT devices, because of the lack of storage space, very soon this data is going to be overwritten. Typically, these IoT devices maintain a circular storage system. So if you're not fast enough to get to these devices and extract the information, it will get overwritten because of the lack of storage space. Even if you are able to identify a suspect IoT device, right, it may not always lead to identification of the criminal because there is no global registry which says this IoT device belongs to this person. There's a refrigerator which has been used to commit a crime. Who owns that refrigerator? A lot of times you don't know that. Right? So all I'm saying is it's tough to map a device to a criminal. Evidence that you've gathered from IoT devices can be that you want to gather can be very easily deleted or changed because these devices lack basic security. So it is very easy for a hacker to break into the IoT devices and tamper with the evidence, which means by the time you reach and collect evidence from the IoT device, it may not be solid evidence to be accepted in a court of law. Lastly, we are dealing here with a variety of devices, not our computing systems like laptops or desktops, but everyday devices, a variety of them. And these could be difficult to identify, as we just saw. These could be very bulky devices, which makes it difficult for us to carry them to a forensics lab. And they may have a whole lot of proprietary platforms for which we may not have the available tools to even investigate into. Well, in terms of tools, as I said, these are new age forensics domains, so not many tools are available. Fortunately, emails has been around for a while, so there are a lot of email forensic tools available in the market. For mobile forensics, there are some tools which are based on the PC. These are PC synchronization tools which we can make use of. There are some SIM card readers that are available that forensic investigators make use of. And there are some toolkits that are available in the market today. Not a very exhaustive set of forensic tools, but still something to start with. But for the cloud and IoT forensics, it's a very raw world today. It's still an upcoming area, and therefore it lacks a lot of credible tools. There are a lot of traditional tools that are available, and that's what forensic investigators try to make use of. But focused and specific tools for the cloud environment, they are still very limited. There are few to name. Frost is a tool that is targeted for OpenStack based cloud platforms. There is Magnet's Axiom cloud module. There is F-Response cloud server utility, but a very handful of them, and they're targeted for some very specific cloud environments. So this is a space which is still lacking, and this is a space which is growing. But this is where the contemporary cyber crimes are going to come from. So the issues that we are today dealing with are lack of certified tools, lack of certified professionals who can deal with this new age cyber forensics, lack of curriculum accreditation. I mean, how many of us have seen courses in college or in the curriculum which talks about cyber forensics? Well, I've been fortunate to teach a course on cyber forensics lately at BITS Pilani, but this is a cyber forensics is not a course in a lot of curriculum in a lot of institutes. It's still considered an immature scientific discipline, right? It's growing, but it's still not mature. There are lack of standards. There are no well-defined standard way of how you should go about doing cyber forensic. There is lack of understanding in the judiciary as well. I mean, our judiciary is not well trained with the cyber crimes and cyber forensics area. And there is rapid changes that keep on happening in the technology, and forensic investigators need to be up to date with the technology changes, keep them up to date with the changes that are happening all around. So these are some of the biggest issues we see as around cyber forensics. Well, I wanted to go through a case study, but I'm not sure how much time we have, so I'll just quickly go through this slide deck. I mean, it talks about Apple Watch, Series 2 watch, which is our everyday IoT. You could look at it like an IoT device which has some form of cellular connectivity. It talks to an Apple iPhone at the back end and synchronizes all information with the iPhone. So basically, you can expect that the watch only stores information for a limited amount of time. It has only limited storage. But quite often, it will synchronize this information with an iPhone at the back end. And when it does that, it may delete the information from the iWatch. As an investigator, if you've been able to get your hands on this watch and possibly the iPhone that synchronizes to this watch, how do you go about the whole domain of data acquisition? How do you acquire evidence? Typically, you use a combination of two methods. You use tools like Cellbrite, UFED can be used to do logical acquisition. So you can do a tool-based acquisition from the Apple iPhone, and you can do a manual acquisition using the watch itself. Now remember, why are we doing these two methods? Because the watch itself provides no methods to connect a tool. It has a hidden diagnostic port, but there is no official cable that is available in the market that can help you connect to this diagnostic port and extract information, right? So the forensics approach that you will have to follow is to connect to the Apple phone instead. The Apple phone is synchronizing information with the watch, right? So because you cannot connect into the watch, you don't have a cable to connect into, you can connect into the Apple iPhone and then use a tool like the Cellbrite UFED to acquire information and use a tool to interpret that information. We call it logical acquisition. But to augment this, you also do manual acquisition by using the digital display on the Apple Watch. So there's a lot of information that you can gather via logical acquisition. We all know information on a mobile device, even like an Apple phone, is stored in the form of databases. The whole information is structured into some databases. And using these databases, you can extract a lot of information, right? That's on the Apple iPhone. But then also via manual acquisition, looking at the smartwatch, you can collect a lot of information from messages, pictures, applications. You could read emails. You could look into calendar entries, and you can also extract contacts and phone contacts on the phone watch. Right? The information is there on the slide deck. I don't think I have a lot of time to go through every bit and piece, but it just gives you an idea of how forensics works in this new age world. It's one of the, for students who are on this attending this lecture today or this talk today, it is one of the fastest growing job markets. We all know how cyber crimes are growing, right? We all know how new age cyber crimes are being used to target IoT infrastructures, cloud installations, mobile devices. So this whole world of contemporary cyber crimes is a very fast growing market. Right? It's one of the fastest growing job markets. There are a lot of professional opportunities in different segments, in whether you want to get into law enforcement, whether in the private sector, whether as part of the intelligence community or in the military or in the academia. There are plenty of professional opportunities if you want to get into the world of cyber forensics. Okay? To close this talk, I'll say the internet we all saw is evolving, and alongside the evolutions that we're seeing with the internet, as the internet continues to grow, cyber crimes are going to become more and more sophisticated. They are going to grow, they are going to become more sophisticated. We've seen from history that nothing is foolproof. There are nothing which is absolute. There is no notion of absolute security. As the President of the United States told us, there is nothing like absolute security. So there are insecure technology solutions which have shown to be attacked into. We know our present is even more dangerous than our before. Okay? There are cybersecurity frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity frameworks that help us address some aspects of the security solutions, help us handle incidents. But these incidents are going to happen, and we do need something to augment, something beyond the cybersecurity frameworks. And that is the whole world of cyber forensics and digital forensic science, which is the domain that is involved in gathering evidence needed to bring the perpetrators to court of law. It's a growing domain. It has its own set of challenges, but there are a lot of job functions, a lot of professional opportunities in the cyber forensics domain. So with that, I would close this talk and open the house for any question and answer.
Thank you, Professor Nishit. It was a wonderful as well as informative session, which I am sure has enlightened all the participants about cyber forensic and its present day challenges. There have been a number of questions, and I have noticed that earlier you have taken up a few questions, but one or two questions that I can see towards the end. So we will be taking them up before we proceed further. So with your permission, can I take up the question?
Sure, please, Dr. Ritika. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first question we have is why GDPR is not compliant in Indian regulations, though ample of Indian data is seamlessly available on the internet to access it, and how to avoid it to get exposed also, because most of the people as such, they are not aware of IT Act and aspects regarding forensics and cyber crimes.
So I think a very valid question, especially in the in the Indian context, because we've seen globally the global community in the cyberspace has been very, very proactive in creating laws like the GDPR, or in the United States of America, you would see analogous privacy laws coming up like the GDPR is in Europe. But in India, we've been trying to play a more of a catch-up game. But the truth is, today we've actually become aware of these data privacy issues. Any conference or any seminar that you go to today, no matter what kind of domain of ICT it deals with, one of the key topics that everyone discusses today is the topic of data privacy. And the Indian Information Technology Act, the IT Act of 2000, we call it the IT Act 2000 in the Indian context, it's been drafted with a focus on data privacy. So there are a lot of sections of the Indian IT Act. I may not be able to exactly call out what the sections of the IT Act are. I don't remember them by heart, but there are sections of the Indian Information Technology Act 2000 which focus on data privacy. Now, having said that, the challenge is not in drafting these laws. The challenge lies in implementing them. So there are two key challenges in there. One, of course, there are repercussions of drafting these laws. A lot of people who are basically trying to promote free internet try to portray some of these laws as being a hindrance to the freedom of people on the cyberspace. So a lot of times, some of these sections of the Indian Information Technology Act have been taken right until the Supreme Court. Some of these acts had to be brought down because they were considered against freedom of speech, right? So there's a challenge in how, in a country, democratic country like India, these acts are implemented. At the same time, there are also technological challenges. How do you bring, as we also in this talk about how difficult it is to gather evidence, how difficult it is to pinpoint and identify criminals. Sometimes it becomes very difficult to implement some of these laws which are there on paper, but implementing it on the cyberspace becomes a challenge. So I think that, in my view, are some of the issues. But having said that, I think everyone is cognizant of the fact that this is a challenge, and therefore the laws have been drafted. It is only going to get better from here.
I surely agree with that, Professor Nishit, and thank you so much for this wonderful session. We are really thankful to you for having spared your time. I would now call upon Professor M.N. Hoda Sir, Director, Bharati Vidyapeeth Institute of Computer Applications and Management, to thank Professor Nishit with this small certificate of participate of today's wonderful session. Hoda Sir.
Yeah, good evening to one and all. And Mr. Nishit, was absolutely fantastic talk which you have delivered on such an striking subject. This subject is going to set the tone of become more important than today.
Sir, your voice is breaking. I think there is some connection issue.
People. So thank you so much, and please keep in touch. Dear participants, there are two other webinars on 24th of July and 31st of July, which have already been announced. So if you have not registered for those webinars, register for them. Because like this webinar, we might need to close the registrations well in time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And once again, a big thank you to Professor Nishit for being with us today for this wonderfully knowledgeable webinar. I also thank Shri Ajay Goyalji, who has joined us today for this webinar. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today for this webinar despite your busy schedule.